let's talk about how much it's actually going to cost us to buy this house. Um, it's not what you see. So if you've never bought a house before, when you look at different listings, it'll say like how much the house is going for, how much they're trying to sell it for. Even once you agree on the price, that's not actually how much you pay by the end of the loan term. We just wanted to go through this closing disclosure, which is the paperwork that you get from your lender before you actually sign the dotted line on buying the house, so that you know exactly how much buying the house is going to cost. Let's get right into it. It starts out with the dates involved. So, like, our closing date that's the date you sign on the dotted line saying you're buying the house, which is also the same date that the lender pays the seller. And our actual sale price is $555,000. And it's going to be over a 30-year period, fixed rate, which means our rate doesn't change year to year. And it's going to be a VA loan because I am a veteran and I decided to go that route so that I didn't have to put money down on the house. Now, for the loan terms, you see the actual loan amount is $566,932. That's different from the sale price of $555,000. That is because part of our closing costs are actually rolled into the loan. So, could I have put money down and actually like made this number the same as this? Yes, I could have. But I didn't want to because I like having money in my bank account. And the more money you pay up front, yes, it's cheaper over the long run. But if you have expenses up front as well, then you end up going into unrelated debt and it becomes more complicated, like on a monthly basis. So our interest rate is 6.25%. And then our monthly principal and interest is $3,490.70. Now, that is not how much we're actually going to be paying, but that is how much the actual principal and interest is. So the principal is like the amount that you're getting a loan on, and then the interest is how much you pay on top of that. So that's the principal and interest payment right there. And then we go down to what the actual payments are. So projected payments, principal interest, again, $3,490.70. I don't have to pay mortgage insurance, even though I'm not putting any money down because this is a VA loan. And then estimated escrow is $539.99. So our actual mortgage payment, like what we will pay the lender, is not just the principal and interest, it's also the escrow. So the total of that is $4,030.69. And that is an estimated amount, which means it could go up or down from year to year because of the taxes, insurance, and assessments. So that's the next little segment here. So estimated taxes, insurance, and assessments, that's what's included in an escrow account. And that our estimate is $539.99 a month. And this includes property taxes and homeowners insurance. So this can vary. We can shop around for homeowners insurance every year and see if we can get that lower. Property taxes we have no control over, but as property increases in value, so as homes get more expensive, property taxes will go up because you get taxed on the home's value, not just what you paid for it. So this is basically this $4,030.69 is the least amount that we will pay, because the value will go up unless like the whole neighborhood burns down or something. And then for the closing costs here, this is costs at closing. Closing costs, the total closing costs, $34,303.65. And then the cash to close is $9,871.65. So the closing costs are basically what you pay on top of the loan, on top of the cost of the building to get the loan. So that's what that is. But the part that we have to pay in cash up front is the $9,871.65.
So to be clear, that's what we're going to end up paying as closing costs. It's just that out of that, $9,871.65 will have to be in cash. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's not going to be, I can't put that in part of the loan. And then if you want to see how much the actual loan is going to cost over the course of time, this right here is on one of the pages. We cut, as I said, we cut out a lot of this because it had like personal information and y'all could like find where we're living. And we're trying not to do that. So this is on, I think this is on the 4th page of the of the closing disclosure. And this is where it shows how much in total it's going to cost over the course of the whole 30 years. So the total amount of payments, the total I will have paid over making all payments of principal, interest, mortgage, insurance, loan costs as scheduled, $1,282,286.79. That is a terrifying amount of money. Mm-hmm. The dollar amount the loan will cost me, which is the finance charge, that's $713,264.79. That's more than the cost of the house. Mm-hmm. Is just the finance charge. And then the amount financed, or the loan amount available after paying the upfront finance charge, that's $543,384.96. And then the APR, which is different from the interest rate. The APR is the costs over the loan term expressed as a rate. So that's 6.609%. Now, the interest rate, to remind you, the actual interest rate is 6.25%. That is not the same as the APR. The APR includes costs that aren't the interest rate. So that's the effect, basically the effective interest rate is 6.609%. And then the total interest percentage, as in the total amount of interest paid over the loan term as a percentage of the loan amount, is 122.12%. That is a lot. That is a lot. But that is what happens when you're paying over a 30-year term, is the interest amount gets spread out that far, and it adds up because you're paying interest every month.
Now, we have said a bunch of times in a few different ways that budget beats broke every time. Where that plays in here is, this is the dollar amount if you just keep paying what they say you need to pay on paper and don't put any more thought into it, and don't take a look at what's possible to maybe bring this down a little bit. The most obvious way to bring this down is to pay more early on, if possible.
And let's show you what that means. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is an amortization schedule that I just Googled and printed off. It's not, the numbers aren't 100% accurate because it's not from the actual lender, but you can kind of see how this works out. So, assuming we're starting with this $543,385, which is the amount financed here. So we're starting with that. Year one, for the total of that year, would pay $41,683.32. Of that, the only principal we're paying is $5,949.09. The interest paid that year is $35,734.23. That is a big difference. That is a big difference. Like, we're hardly paying any principal. It's mostly interest. Now,
Not a good look.
if you look towards year, let's say 28 here, you're paying the same $41,683.32 over the course of the year. But then you're paying $35,260.69 of principal and only $6,422.63 of interest. So by year 28, you're paying way more on the actual principal amount, or what you're getting the loan on, versus the interest, which is the extra finance charge. So if we pay extra here, if we pay extra principal when we're early in the loan, it will actually cut down on how much interest you're paying a lot faster. It'll move us further down in the payment schedule. So let's say I can put an extra $6,000 on the principal in year one. Let's say we can manage that somehow. That would bump us down an extra year, essentially. So we'd be paying less interest. We'd be closer to even.
Now, let me see if I got this right. If in the first year we managed to pay that much for the principal and the interest of the first year, and
we have to. That's the minimum payment.
Right, but I'm saying, having done that, if we managed successfully to pay another $6,000, right, by bumping us up an extra year in the schedule, that could save us as much as $35,000 or $34,000 worth of interest over the long term.
Yes.
Y'all, that's not chump change.
But then if we pay an extra $6,000 near the end, that's not going to make as much difference because there's not that much interest left to pay at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So as much as it kind of sucks, because in the beginning, when you first buy the house, you have like improvements you want to make. You have like furniture you want to buy. You have all these other things that you want to pay for in the beginning, but that's when it makes the most difference in paying down the mortgage early.
Yeah. And honestly, and this is one of the things we discussed, even something as simple and common sense as going back to school to be in a better position to make more money, that still comes at an upfront cost that would take away from the chance to save this money over here by paying some more of this money over here. So you got to think about it. Like, how does it really play out long term? Every choice has a consequence, and these are not small numbers to be messing around with.
They're really not. And on top of that, there's, with every, they call it opportunity cost. That's what it is, opportunity cost. So anything that we spend money on that isn't going to benefit us as much as paying off the mortgage early is going to come at a pretty high cost. And we have to keep that in mind, because I don't want to pay $1.2 million for this house in the end. I don't want to pay that. That's a lot of money. And also the other thing to keep in mind is refinancing. So if at some point interest rates go down and we want to refinance the house in order to get a lower interest rate, that would bump this down like a lot. But refinancing means paying for closing costs again. So that's going to cost us more money. And on top of that, it's going to take us a while to get to the point where we have enough wiggle room between what we owe and how much the house is worth so that we can roll any of the costs into the mortgage.
Yeah.
So a lower interest rate wouldn't necessarily help us because we'd have to pay more up front to refinance anytime soon. So like if loan rates go down, we would have to wait probably until we were like down here somewhere.
That's wild.
To make it worth it, because we'd have to pay closing costs again. And the closing costs that's like $40,000.
Yep.
Plus, we would be essentially getting like a big loan again. So it would, like, we'd have to pay the lender again. We'd have to pay pay the title and all that stuff. We just wouldn't have to pay the buyer anymore. But like the actual cost of the loan, we'd have to pay that again. So if we do that while the house is still like this high, like if interest rate went down like in year 2, we would still be too close to the home's value to roll a bunch of costs into the cost of the mortgage. We would have to pay more up front. And we wouldn't have that money saved because we wouldn't have replaced the savings at that point.
Now, to be clear, this is not a scary story to scare the kids out of trying to buy a home in the first place. This is just a simple reminder that sticking your head in the ground and looking away from the numbers will not ever help.
And also, the actual cost of the house is not what you see when you're shopping around for houses. The actual cost of owning this house is all of this. All of this. So when you're trying to buy a house and you're thinking, oh yeah, I could totally get a house, even if you don't get a house that costs this much money, even if you don't get a house that's $500,000, there's still going to be these additional costs. There's still going to be your property taxes and your insurance on top of the mortgage itself. There's still going to be the closing costs. Like our closing costs, $34,000. You still have to pay that. And closing costs are going to be less when you buy a less expensive house. But that's something to keep in mind is those are still going to exist. A lot of those costs are not necessarily based on how much the house is worth. It's based on how much it costs to research your title, how much it costs to pay your, like the different people who need to get paid, the city, the state, like document fees and stuff. So yeah, these numbers aren't going to be exactly the same for you, obviously, but it's something to keep in mind when you're buying a house, that it's not just the numbers that you see on the listing. It's a lot more than that. And of course, this still does not include what, Wynn and I were talking about earlier. There's still maintenance, there's still improvements, there's still the cost of maintaining the property, like roof.
It doesn't pay for itself.
Yeah, like the roof needs to get replaced like every 10 to 15 years. And the furnace needs to get replaced like every 10 to 15 years too.
It's reasonable to eventually expect tuck pointing on brickwork.
Well, that's a whole nother thing. Not everyone's going to buy a brick house. But pretty much everyone's going to have a furnace. Pretty much everyone's going to have a roof. And those have, like, standard, like, lifespans.
That's true.
Water heaters need to be replaced. Plumbing at some point is going to have to be done. Electrical stuff, it has to be fixed. Like, these kinds of things happen. And when you're renting, you don't have to worry about it. But when you own the property, you do have to worry about it. And you do have to pay for it. And that's on top of the actual cost of the mortgage. So when you think, is it cheaper to rent or to buy? Like, yes, it can be cheaper to rent technically, because usually when you're renting, the homeowner, the person you're renting for, bought the house way before you got to rent there. So you're paying based on what their rate was and how much they paid like 10, 20 years ago. You're not paying your rent based on what it would cost you to buy that building. Mm-hmm. And that's something to keep in mind too. Like in some cases, it is cheaper to rent than to buy. This house, and I keep saying house, but it is technically an apartment building. It's just 3 units. So it's a 3-unit apartment building. And it's going to cost us more to have this building than it costs us to rent our apartment now. It's going to cost a lot more, but in the long run, it's going to be worth it. If for no other reason than because we won't have to deal with a landlord who doesn't fix things like our landlord doesn't. We can kind of take control of our future and have things the way we want it, and have stability for the kids. Like they'll have one address. They're not, well, their mom might move, but we're not going to move again. And that stability means a lot when previously they had moved around a lot. And I did too when I was young. I moved around a lot when I was a kid.
Same. One last thing that I want to make sure I add. One of the things we have to consider in terms of what makes this worth it is the idea of creating an opportunity for generational wealth. And while that can pay off, that extra income down the line, that extra stream of income, stream of revenue stream, can pay off down the line.
From the renters, right?
Yes.
That you're talking about.
Yes.
From the tenants.
From the tenants. That won't mean nearly as much if this ends up being how much we have to pay long term. Which is why taking an intentional look at that amortization schedule and thinking ahead how to budget and pacing things a particular way, budget really does beat broke.
Yes. And if you have any questions about this, or if you have a different understanding of what any of this means, because I promise you, I have bought a house before, but I am not by any means an expert. And this is not coming from a place of expertise. This is coming from a place of
lived experience.
Sure. I was gonna say more like familiarity. So I'm more familiar with looking at paperwork like this versus someone who's never bought a house before. And if nothing else, you can see this as an example of what it might cost you to buy a house if you buy something at a similar rate. Now, of course, not everyone's going to qualify for a VA loan because not everyone's a veteran. So if you put money down, because we're not putting any money down. Our closing costs is the only money we're going to pay. So if you put money down, these numbers will look different. But it's just an example, and I hope it helps. I hope it helps you. I hope it helps you kind of decide whether or not buying a house could be worth it and whether or not you want to put money down, because there are other options for not putting money down. You could also get an FHA loan, like most people call it a first-time homebuyer loan, where you can put either a low percentage down or nothing down, depending on the rules. That's something to keep in mind too. But again, if you don't put money down, that means you're paying more in over the course of the loan, because it's all financed. So that's just, that's something to keep in mind and something to think about. And yeah, I hope you remember that you deserve financial stability. And I hope you have a great day on purpose. Bye.